Hello!
Hello!
Thank you guys all for coming out. So, you guys are wondering what the heck this time travel thing probably is, right? Alright, so this is how I start every show. I want every single one of you to pull out those funny gadgets you've got. They look kind of like this. I know you call them phones, but they don't have buttons or dials, so I know you're not telling the truth. And I know they're not computers either, because this is what a pocket computer looks like in 1964. So pull out your phones. Everybody pull out your phones. I want you to put this thing called a browser. And I want you all to type into your browser galacticjourney.org. All one word, galacticjourney.org. So what this is, it's a time machine to 55 years ago to the day. That means right now, as we speak, on this stage, in this room, it is March 8th, 1964. And I am the traveler, and this is my lovely wife, the editor, and this is my daughter, the young traveler. It's also her daughter. It's amazing how that works. And there's now 20 of us on the journey talking about all sorts of things, from science fiction magazines to movies to comics, and current events and space shots. We have two correspondents in England. One of them's covering a new show about a fellow in a blue box. It's called Dr. What? Something like that. I don't get it in the United States because it doesn't air here, so I don't care that much about it. Although, have any of you guys seen Supercar? Anybody? Fireball XL5? There's a little marionettes walking around doing stuff. I heard something called Thunderbirds. I don't know what that is. It hasn't come out yet. So anyway, the way it works is I talk to you like it's 1964. And this is your panel. So I'm going to do a little introduction of what's going on right now on March 8th, 1964. Sorry, you were just so fascinating. I had to listen. And then you guys are going to direct this presentation. You guys are going to ask me questions, and we're going to go wherever you want to go in 1964. And the best questions are going to get prizes. All right, so what's going on in 1964? Well, politics, right? It's an election year. So I'm sure you guys all know the president is running unopposed, right? Probably won't be primary. But the field and the other parties, there's just so many people, right? Who can you pick from? Who are you guys voting for in the primaries?
Obama.
I don't know any of it. Johnson. Well, good. But the other party, we got so many to choose from. We've got Goldwater, we've got Rockefeller, we've got Henry Cabot Lodge is running, right? We've got the first woman major candidate, Madeline Smith. She's a senator from Maine. She has no chance, but I'm glad she's there.
Nixon running?
He said, "You won't have me to kick around anymore." Right? He ran for governor in 1962, and we said, "We don't want Dick." Here in California, right? And by the way, as we know, the governor is Governor Brown, right? We all love Governor Brown. Pat Brown. He's got a son named Jerry. I don't know if he'll ever amount to anything.
A real movie.
But Pat Brown is cool. Romney, you've probably heard of Romney, right? He's the governor of Michigan. So I got to tell you, it's so crazy. I'm living in the Twilight Zone, which is in its 5th season, by the way. I'm living in the Twilight Zone, right? So Kennedy was advocating for a tax cut, huge tax cut, which just passed, by the way. So 90% down to 70%, and across the board corporate taxes. The Republicans said, no, this is terrible, you're going to bankrupt us, because of course the Republicans are for higher taxes. And in fact, in Michigan, Governor Romney was arguing for higher taxes, and the Democrats said, no, we want lower taxes, right? That's probably never going to change, right?
I'm sure the Democrats will always be for lower taxes.
Absolutely, and the Republicans will be the party of fiscal responsibility. What, did I say something funny? All right, so that's politics, right?
Wait, Romney, what was his first name?
George.
Oh.
George.
Romney.
He has a son, Willard, something like that. Again, probably won't amount to anything. Certainly won't ever go to Utah, of all places. All right, so that's politics. And we can talk politics if you want. Politics, of course, seep into our pop culture, right? So the biggest danger everybody has right now is this third world war that could happen any day, right? Atomic apocalypse. All right, we've got the nukes, they've got the nukes, we got the bomb, they got the bomb. And of course, this is suffusing everything we watch. So, for instance, a couple months ago, you may have seen 7 Days in May. Kirk Douglas, Ava Gardner, Burt Lancaster. You guys see this movie? You guys know what it's about? It takes place a few years from now, and the President of the United States wants peace with the Russians, and Burt Lancaster tries to launch a coup. And Kirk Douglas is the only one who stops him, because Kirk Douglas is awesome. He's Jewish, by the way. I don't know why I brought that up. I don't see why that matter. But anyway, so that's a cool movie. Another cool movie that just came out. Have you heard Dr. Strangelove?
Yeah.
Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. So that's a great movie starring Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers and Peter Sellers. So Dr. Strangelove, I recommend you watch it. And George C. Scott, who you probably know from a little-loved show called East Side, West Side, where he plays a social worker in New York, which is actually amazing, groundbreaking, first black woman in a major role on a TV show. You don't see that very often in 1964. Television, speaking of, how many of you guys are Twilight Zone fans?
You!
Right? So that's in its 5th season. Some would say that's a season too far. But there have been some good episodes this year. There's another show which is competing with Twilight Zone for the science fiction anthology. You know which one I'm talking about? The Outer Limits, that's right. And the Outer Limits differs from Twilight Zone in that it always has a guy in a suit. And what's really funny is the other day, so I'm like, hey Lorelai, you gotta see this show. It's the one that stars a guy in a suit. And she looked at the TV and it starred Martin Landau as the guest. And he was a guy from the future who had the ability to turn into any shape he wanted, so you couldn't see that he was an ugly mutation. And the form he took was a man in a suit. So I said, look, it's a man in a suit. And she's like, yeah, so? And I was like, no, you don't understand. He's a man in a suit who transforms into a man in a suit.
We cover all of the Outer Limits episodes as they come out. Our correspondent Natalie does, and they are quite excellent. If you, on your phones, where you opened up galacticjourney.org, if you look for that little green magnifying glass and type in what you want to find, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, or your favorite author of the time, politics, whatever subject you want, you can find all the articles from the past 5 or 6 years that this has been going on about that thing.
So, but you guys came here to talk about comics, right? Because this is San Diego Comic Fest. An intimate gathering of fans, and we had them in 1964 just as you have them whatever year you guys are from. And so I got into comic books recently, right? For a long time I wasn't into comic books, and then in the early 60s suddenly we had this profusion of comics, right? Up until 1961, all it was Westerns. There was National Comics. I think the hip kids call it DC. Right? So National Comics was coming out with, it's kiddie fare in tight underwear. If you like Superman and Batman and all that, that's great. But it wasn't the most mature stuff in the universe. And then and comics basically died in the late 50s because American distribution folded. So all the independent comics went out. And in the early 60s, there was this house called Marvel that showed up. And they started putting out stuff that was actually kind of neat. So in addition to girls' comics, which I actually kind of like, and Westerns and stuff like that, they also had superheroes. So how many of you are familiar with the Fantastic Four?
Yeah.
Right? Fantastic Four debuted in 61, and it was exciting. There was a team of people who didn't actually like each other all that much, and that friction was interesting and led to stories. And yes, Reed Richards has an apt last name, because he is kind of a dick. But it's the early 60s, somebody has to represent the average American male. In 62, we got a guy named Spider-Man, and the guy who draws him, you guys all know Ditko. Unfortunately, I had to miss the panel, the guy talking about Ditko in the other room. They booked us across from each other, but what can you do? But what's really exciting to me is I've always been interested in the stories about the freaks, the weirdos. And you've probably seen there's a superhero team, it's led by a paraplegic, and it's a bunch of people who got their powers at birth and they're ostracized from humanity for their superpowers. You guys know who I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the Doom Patrol. Right? So, well, it's fair that you mentioned the X-Men. So the Doom Patrol and the X-Men came out at the same time. right? They both came out in 1963, and they both star a guy in a wheelchair who's a genius, and a bunch of kids, well, they're not kids so much in the Doom Patrol, who have these powers, and they're trying to be accepted by humanity despite having these freakish powers. And Doom Patrol was kind of an interesting, mature step for DC in 1963. And taking on handicapped people in 63 was pretty groundbreaking for Stan Lee, too. He's been given a lot of latitude. He also writes like every single book Marvel puts out right now. Hello, sir. And this month, we got a brand new superhero, speaking of handicapped people. He is a lawyer, but don't hold that against him. He is a lawyer, and he fights crime because he has super senses, despite the fact that he is blind. And yes, no jokes, I am talking about Daredevil #1, just came out last month. And in the Avengers, which is a group that just formed, we have a new fellow who was just thawed from the ice. He was a Golden Era comics hero, and you guys know who I'm talking about. Captain America just joined the Avengers. So I mention all this because these are all storylines that are all going to be very familiar probably in the future. And they're all just coming out right now. Iron Man. Do you know where Iron Man got his start? So you guys have told me that apparently there's a movie in the future about Iron Man, and he like gets captured and he has to make a suit to escape, right? Do you know what country that happened in?
Vietnam.
North Vietnam. There's two of them. Don't forget, there will always be two Vietnams. North Vietnam, that's right. He's a new character, and it's just fascinating. Vietnam has become a thing, by the way, so don't let anyone tell you that the Vietnam War started in the late 60s. By 63, it's in the newspaper every single day. People are dying. They're showing pictures of blown-up helicopters. We've had our first people on television be Vietnam veterans. So it is a thing that is our public consciousness. And the last thing I'll bring up before I take it to the floor is music has changed dramatically in just the last 3 months. So 3 months ago, we had folk, we had pop, we had Motown, we had country, we had surf guitar, we had every single kind of music, and they were all competing for the top 40. These days, who is it? The Beatles. It has been the Beatles for the last 2 months, occupying both the #1 and the #2 slot. Girls are going crazy for these guys with the shaggy hair. These people who need haircuts. These beardies. No offense. All right, so that is a little primer on what's happening in 1964. So from here, I'm going to take it to you folks. You guys need a mic?
Me?
I'm going to give it to you guys. Questions. What do you guys want to know? You.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I feel that Brain from Doom Patrol is actually the hero of the series. I feel that his relationship with Monsieur Mola and the incidents leading up to him becoming a disembodied brain really make him the sympathetic hero. And I want to know your take on that as the series. You are at episode. Which episode are you at?
The problem is that plot line is from my future. So there is a piece of me that would absolutely agree that is the greatest love story that DC ever wrote, was Monsieur Mala and the Brain. But unfortunately, my 1964 me, which is the only me that is here, says, what?
I'm curious because that character is introduced in the first issue, the Brain. Where do you feel that character's development is going, or do you think it's just a throwaway character that we're going to retire?
I would not say it's a throwaway. So something that has happened in comics in the early 60s is the existence of arcs. So it used to be, not only were all the issues episodic, but you got 2 or 3 episodes per issue. Stories were only like 10 pages long. Now you've got multi-issue arcs. You've got villains who come back. Dr. Octopus just came back in The Amazing Spider-Man. So we are approaching an interesting time where you can get invested in the characters and see their development over time. So I'm looking with great anticipation and seeing what they do with Brain. But they haven't done much with him yet. No. Doom Patrol just got its own comic. It used to be just part of an anthology.
Yeah.
And again, this being 1964, if we look a couple of years into the future, we have Maxwell Smart using what we now call a cell phone. We have the Batman comics being turned into a television series.
Blowing my mind, man. I can't handle it.
You want to talk about spy shows and the popularity there?
Yeah, we can talk about spy shows. So right now, probably the biggest spy is James Bond. He's come out with 2 movies already. He is not my favorite spy. He's not even my favorite spy from England. Are you guys familiar with John Drake, Danger Man? So that is a show that came out in England, and then it came over in summer reruns to America.
Secret Agent Man.
That hasn't happened yet. That comes out in England later this year, I understand. Right now, it's just Danger Man is a half-hour show starring John Drake, who does not romance women. His gadgets are believable. He's very progressive. He chafes a little bit under a organization that may not be as progressive as he would like it to be. And it's just fascinating stuff. He actually turned down the role of James Bond because it wasn't wholesome enough. Patrick McGowan is a good Catholic, and he wanted wholesome television, and he gave us John Drake, who's amazing.
He sounds like a stick in the mud, but actually it's a great series with a lot of interesting plots and interesting twists. Definitely worth watching.
All right, who's next? About anything? Go ahead.
Sure, the Boston Strangler. I know that Albert DeSalvo has just been apprehended at this point. Do you think that this is really just the police trying to find anybody that they can stick it to, or do you feel like that there's any evidence backing up this crime?
So I know of the Boston Strangler, and I've heard of some of his cases. That's not a case I followed very closely. I've been more interested in Frank Sinatra's son being kidnapped. Did you hear about that one? So he got kidnapped, and then it turned out it was probably a put-up job for publicity. They just sentenced the 3 people involved in that. So I've been following that case a little more closely. It's closer to home, you know?
And of course, there's the major case that everyone was talking about just a few months ago, and that was the president being shot.
Yes, did anyone catch that on television?
24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, by the way. So we, of course, watched it live as Walter Cronkite teared up. Then for an hour tried to forestall the news that the president was dead. He was grasping at every straw, and then finally he had to take off his glasses, his eyes teared, and said that the president is dead. We watched that, and it was just an amazing coincidence that those networks, CBS and ABC, had gone to half-hour daily news programming. I mean, can you imagine filling a half hour of news every day? And so they've just implemented the technology to do on-the-scene reporting. And then, obligingly, Lee Harvey Oswald shot Jack Kennedy.
Not only on the scene, but in the studio.
Right.
Like that was new. You can see if you're watching the background, it's not a professional setup. Walter Cronkite is sitting at his desk, and there's people moving around behind him, doing stuff and bringing him papers and stuff, and so it's almost kind of a makeshift setup. It feels like that they've thrown together to have this important report.
It took them 19 minutes just to get the machine to warm up to film him. ABC took like an hour, and it's amazing watching Severide on ABC because he just does not have the professional chops of Walter Cronkite. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of Walter Cronkite over the next several years.
The gentleman in the crown back there had a question earlier.
Yes. What year are you from again? What year are you from?
He's from 1964, and if you bring a fish, I'm going to send you out the door.
I wish to know if the goat or fish are triumphant.
That's right. Guards. All right, who's next?
False verses.
So in the assassin's
New fellow.
You're sort of talking about tell me about this newfangled show. I think it's called The Jetsons.
So the Jetsons lasted for 1 season, blessedly. Oh, I have friends here. This is great. Are you guys? So you guys all know Hanna-Barbera, not personally, probably, but so the Flintstones came out in 1961, I think, 60 or 61, and they were the cartoon version of the Honeymooners, right? They even tried to sound like Walter Matthau for Fred Flintstone. And a couple of years in, it became a kiddie show. It's still on the air. In 1964, yes. In season 4, actually. And then last year, they decided to take the Flintstones to the jet age, to the space age, and they came up with the Jetsons. And the Jetsons is amazing in its conception of the future, right? I don't know how many things are going to come to pass, but it's such a mechanical future, right? Everything's treadmills and little like arms that come out and do stuff for you. It's so almost retro in its vision of the future. And it only lasts one season, and I can't imagine why. The only reason I can think it only lasted a season is because it wasn't very good. But for people who like the Jetsons, I love you, thank you for coming, and please buy my book. Maybe not anymore.
Have you heard about the World's Fair?
So that's coming this summer. Seattle had a World Fair last year. Was it last year or the year before? I think it was 2 years ago, yeah. Thank you, Coach in the audience with the cue card. 2 years ago, and that's what the Space Needle, which is a super cool, I mean, if you want to talk space age looking thing, the Space Needle is pretty neat to look at, and that's in Seattle. And we were actually there for that. The expo this year is in New York, right?
And I heard Ford's introducing a hybrid muscle car, compact car, is that correct?
Ford is doing a hybrid. Oh, the Mustang.
That's correct.
That comes out next month.
Yeah.
Cars are really interesting. Boy, have things changed, right? 5 years ago, there was not a car without a fin, and it was like 20 feet long, and it was seaworthy. And now you've got like the Rambler, and everything after that is like these little tiny cars. And then, have you seen what they're coming out with Germany? It's amazing. So the Mercedes still makes Panzers, I believe, and they are designed to invade Poland. But Volkswagen, the car that Hitler promised everybody, well, we're getting it. How ironic is that? And their advertisements are amazing. I mean, they're just playing off the fact that they are the little guy, quite literally. And those bugs are really cute, actually, and I think they're going to set a trend. Someday we might even be getting small cars from Japan. I mean, we already get small TVs and radios from there, so why not cars?
But the car of the future is the Corvair, of course.
The Corvair is beautiful. The Avanti, have you seen that? I mean, it's last year's model. They aren't making it anymore, but Studebaker made the Avanti. Oh my God, what a beautiful car. Studebaker closed down, or they are closing down their American operations. Their South Bend factory stopped after decades. How sad is that, right? American tradition. We lost DeSoto a couple of years. Yeah, pour one out for Studebaker and DeSoto. In a few years, there won't be any American cars anymore. We need to find a way to make America great again. Yes, sir.
So I heard in Detroit this year they had a little thing called a comic convention. Do you think anything's going to come of that?
I do. I'll tell you something. So right now we're in a convention, right? And this feels very sort of new and weird. But conventions of people like us, unusual people, fans, people with beanies with propellers on them, they've been going around since 1939. Has anyone gone to a World Science Fiction Convention? So I was at the World Science Conviction. I was convicted. I'm guilty of science fiction fandom. So I went to the convention last year. We were on the Hugo ballot, by the way. So if any of you are registered for WorldCon, remember, best fanzine is spelled Galactic, Germany. So to answer your question in this roundabout way, even in 1964, conventions are happening, and they can have attendance of as many as 300 people. It's even international in character. You've got Easter cons in England, and those are a tradition that have been going on for like 10 years. So I'm not surprised that there's a comic convention going on there, and I would not be surprised if comic conventions would expand to places like San Diego.
Not only that, but they even have a fund to get people across the ocean to different conventions.
The Transatlantic Fan Fund, which we donated to this year. Michael, and then you. Yeah.
What's our favorite TV show now?
Have any of you guys seen Burke's Law?
Yes.
So, I'm going to go out on a limb here. So Burke's Law is what Batman would be if Bruce Wayne's parents hadn't died. Right? Raise your hand if you know what Burke's Law is. 1, 2, 3. If you get a chance, there is this thing. It's named me pipe or some pronoun and a cylindrical thing. It's a place where you can watch movies on. Oh yes, that thing. Sorry, 1964. We have visiphones. You can watch all of Burke's Law on YouTube, and it's a very fluffy, almost throwback to the 40s with its frothy banter, and it stars this captain of the LA Police Department who is a millionaire, and he's a playboy, and he's got a different woman every night, and he's got his team includes an older sergeant fellow and a young, sharply dressed, skinny-tied apprentice detective, and they solve crimes together. And there's a murder at the beginning.
Very handsome young man.
Yes, very handsome, and Burke's pretty good looking too.
Yes, he is.
He's about my age.
Sergeant, I understand Sergeant Muldoon is turned into a monster, is that correct? Sergeant Muldoon from Car 54 is turned into a monster.
That show just ended. So I bring, that 2 seasons, that ended last season. I bring up Burke's Law because most people have not heard of it, and I did something very naughty at the last convention. I wrote a story where,
I wrote a script.
I wrote a script that involved Captain Burke's secret and his detective, but you will definitely not find this story unless you go to AO3 and look up Albatross GJ. Did I say that fast enough that no one will do it? Okay.
Actually, this is interesting that you bring this up because something that the journey does is try to highlight marginalized populations, both protagonists and authors. And Gideon told me today he just read the first explicitly gay story he's seen in a science fiction magazine.
It's true, 1964. So up until today, there have been 2 stories that dealt with implied homosexuality. This story by Harry Harrison was the first one where you had an entire population and it was nothing but men, and they lived together and they had children together and they had romantic relationships with each other, and it was just matter of fact. It was very far in the future, and it was interesting. They were a subdivision of the human race, the men, and they were the peaceful ones. And like the other stories that we're talking about, it also involved first contact situation with other creatures. An amazing story by Harry Harrison called Final Contact, and it just came out in the April 1964 Galaxy magazine, which I will be covering. I'll be writing the article tomorrow morning. So if you go to the Journey, that'll be coming up, and I'll be talking about that.
Do you know when it's coming out on the site?
Tomorrow.
It's actually coming out tomorrow?
I'm gonna write it and publish it tomorrow. I will call my editors and have them publish it tomorrow.
So watch out for his review of that story, because it's bound to be interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty. How many of you know that women write science fiction? So if I were to say classic women's science fiction, what name would you throw out? All right, not the first one. More contemporary.
Contemporary to 1960s.
20th century. Ursula K. Le Guin, right? Anybody else?
Joanna Russ.
Joanna Russ, not bad, not
Mary
bad.
Zimmer Bradley.
Mary Zimmer Bradley, that's a good one. She's big right now. She's also
Anne McCaffrey.
she has her own issues attaching to her right now. Her husband is actually being banned from Worldcon for unsavory practices. But a lot of people think women penned science fiction starts with Ursula K. Le Guin in 1962. And in fact, when she came on the scene, there were some 40 women science fiction authors producing science fiction. And we actually have a series called The Second Sex. It's a 6-part series now, and it's just little biographies of all the women who are producing science fiction and links to all their stories. So that's pretty cool if you're into that. We have our first black science fiction author that I know of, Sam Delaney, who may still be alive. For all I know.
I know you said that the Beatles are here right now, but what
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed you. Should I get to you? Can I get a question and then get to you?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Are there any female artists out there that are kind of taking some of the attention away from the Beatles, or is it all about them?
I have not seen any acts from England that are women acts. The big acts right now are the Beatles and the Dave Clark Five. But there are plenty of women on the American airways, particularly in the Motown. So you've got, not only do you have independent acts like, or not independent, but you've got like Martha and the Vandellas. The Supremes are a new act. They had a disastrous first record, but they're starting to come into their own. One of my favorites, I don't know if you've heard of them, do you know what the Cookies are? The Cookies did back track for like Neil Sedaka and Mel Torme. Ray Charles hit the road jack. They did the backtrack for that. They also have several of their own songs, which I really dig. So there are plenty of women, and of course you've got Peter, Paul, and Mary, which I actually don't like. They're just so saccharine. They take like Bob Dylan and just rain sugar all over Bob. How many? That's what I want to hear when someone's singing. How many roads? No, I don't want that.
Unless it's the Young Traveler.
Oh, when the Young Traveler does it, it's fine, because she actually plays the harmonica, which is about as melodious an instrument as Bob Dylan's voice. Answer, my friend, blowing in the wind.
If you want to see commentary on and notes on the music that's coming out, not only is it often featured in the articles, but if you go to the Twitter, which is actually Journey Galactic, because we couldn't get Galactic Journey, so look at Journey Galactic on Twitter, and if you follow us there, he will often post advertisements of the time, as well as links to the current top songs.
Every Friday we do a musical hit. So there's a news ticker on the side of the site.
Yeah, if you turn your phone sideways and scroll up, you can actually see the current tweets, or you can go to Twitter.
Or you can turn your head sideways. And that works too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. Top comedians at the time.
So that's interesting. Jews are everywhere.
Of course.
So actually on the same show that the Beatles came out in, Myron Cohen, you familiar with Myron Cohen? So his shtick is he goes into the Yiddish accent. He was talking about how he was doing Russian humor from Red Square. Let's see if I can do this joke and not kill it. He talked about how in Red Square today, Khrushchev went out and he said, there will be appliances for everyone. Everyone will have washing machines and telephones and televisions. Mark my words, it will happen. Who wants one of who doesn't have one of these? And a man raises his hand. He says, who are you, sir? Goldstein. Come here, Mr. Goldstein. A week later, everybody will have everything. Washing machines, radios, television. Anyone here not got? You, sir. What is your name? Goldberg. Yes, what can I do for you? What happened to Goldstein? Probably butchered that. But I did watch it live on television. It's not like you can replay these things. So yeah, there are, Jack Benny has a TV show. Actually, Jack Benny, I understand, is not getting renewed after, 20 years of radio and television. Yeah, that's actually kind of sad. I really like the Jack Benny program. That kind of sort of variety act sort of thing. What's her name? Liza Minnelli. I'm sorry. Over the Rainbow. Her kids are in showbiz, and they all appear on her show. That's where I got confused. Yeah, Judy Garland has a show, and it's running as we speak. Yeah,
there's Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce, of course, absolutely.
Very controversial.
There's a young fellow named Bill Cosby, I think.
I spy.
I don't know if he's ever going to amount to much, and when he does, I don't know if we're going to want to know him. So comedy's definitely a thing. What's it? It wasn't Lenny Bruce. I got a record of somebody, but I can't remember. Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks did an album in 1960. I've got that one with the 10,000-year-old man and stuff like that. So yeah, Jews are like really big right now. It's like everyone tried to kill us, and then they felt bad about it. And so now we're on television all over the place. It's great.
We should have come to art during the Holocaust earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was an art during the Holocaust panel earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, should come to that. Yeah, my mom posted it.
That'd be fantastic. Are you a Landsman?
What?
I guess not. Don't worry, we won't have spot checks.
Speaking of that, do you think someday that bagels will be available in places other than the Jewish bakery?
So that's an interesting question, right? That's actually a very interesting question and very timely. So 10 years ago, you could get American food. And because of the chains that were starting to open up, you could get American food that was the same wherever you went. Amazing. Thanks to a lady named Julia Childs, we started getting exposed to foreign foods. So she has a show called The French Chef. You can catch it on like public access if you live on the East Coast near Boston. And she cooks on television. This is not going to catch on. And French cooking is all the rage right now, and there is sort of this awakening of the idea that there might be cuisines other than American food. Right, I know. Chinese. People are starting to eat Chinese food. God forbid we might be eating like Japanese food and not have to go to Japan for it, because I love sushi.
Recently, I've been experimenting with new dishes and stuff for the family. And I remember my dad likes to watch some late night shows before he goes to bed. And Julia Childs actually came on the other day, and she was showing us how to cook green beans and like the right way, and lots of butter. So I tried that for everybody.
And by the way, real quick, when she says she watched this on television, you have to understand, I am crazy. If you go to my house, it is a time machine. So I have complete command of the airwaves. So not only do I read the newspaper every day 55 years ago, 1964, but I have an AM radio broadcaster that plays that music you were hearing here. That's a simulcast from my AM broadcaster. If you tune in to 670 AM anywhere near my house, you will hear that station. I have a television station that broadcasts exactly what was on the air 55 years ago. There's a great show by a guy named Gene Roddenberry. He was in the war, he was a police officer. It's called The Lieutenant, and it's actually based in Camp Pendleton. Are you guys watching this show? They had an episode the other day that dealt with racism. It had a young woman named Nichelle Nichols. I don't know if you see, she's a beautiful, great actress. And it's a guy named Dennis Hopper as this white bigot, and there was the boyfriend of Nichelle Nichols. I cannot remember the actor's name. Handsome dude. And there's just the racism like suffuses the episode, and it's how this young lieutenant in the Marines has to deal with the fact that there's this racism in his platoon. That's pretty sophisticated stuff for early 1964.
So, what's this I hear? There's going to be a soap opera with vampires? Dark Shadows.
I haven't seen that one.
But
You're scooping me.
The rumors are out, aren't they?
Hey, that sounds familiar, but I haven't seen it. So you're saying I should watch it. What network is it on?
I think it was ABC, wasn't it?
Right, ABC.
Was it ABC?
I tend to be a CBS guy, so. But I will now look it up. You have intrigued me, sir. Rarely do I get stumped. You understand you are now guaranteed to get a prize. Make sure he gets the prize.
Yes, now, first episode was 1966.
No prize.
We're not psychics. we have a lot of contacts, but we can't predict the future.
Is there any reason television sets need 12 channels on the dial?
Right. Well, there are local stations. Right? And for a while there was the Dumont network, which didn't last for very long. It goes higher than that. If any of you guys checked out the UHF, there's some crazy things on the UHF. That goes all the way to channel 83. I'm thinking of starting my own. How neat would that be? Huh?
Dialing for dollars.
Right.
I know that you were talking about TV and you were talking about sort of this Jewish explosion. Do you think that has anything to do with like the Catskills comedian kind of subset that was going on for a while?
The Borscht Belt?
Yeah, the Borscht Belt.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's been going on forever. There's no question that those people got their start there, went up, and I think that it's a combination of that bunch of talent. Right. You got to remember in the late 40s, early 50s when television came out. I'd say television really came into its own around 52. They were starving for anything to fill up the channels, and most of it was live television, and most of it was variety stuff. Sid Caesar, any of you guys watch the Sid Caesar? He's a funny guy. So I think you've got all these people who are used to being in front of an audience, regardless of whether they're discerning or not.
What happened to the NBC Symphony Orchestra?
They're not still around?
I don't think so. Are they? Are they still around, or are they gone?
I have not seen them on television. Again, I don't know everything because I watch TV like everybody else. I read TV Guide. But there are a couple of. So there's Lawrence Welk, of course, if you have no taste, and there's Ed Sullivan if you have some. Have any of you guys caught Jazz Casual? So Jazz Casual is out of a San Francisco station. And it's like live jazz shows that last like half an hour, and the guy who runs it is this cool cat, and you'll just sit and listen to these just amazing, famous people, Dizzy Gillespie, Dave Brubeck. It just brings them on the show. Huh?
Lena Horne.
I don't know if I saw that episode. I would have loved to. I think I missed it. But yeah, if you get a chance, this is also available on that magic thing called YouTube. Look up Jazz Casual, because we're right in there's an interesting transition phase in music between traditional, well, not even traditional. You had swing, and then you had jazz of the 50s, and now you've got sort of this freeform jazz, which is really out there, man.
So the original NBC Symphony performed. The first broadcast was on from 1937 to 1954, and it was a radio orchestra. And then there was the Symphony of the Air, which performed from 1954 to 1963.
Okay.
So that was probably something we didn't get where we live. Not everything is broadcast everywhere.
Yeah, that's something you got to remember. You guys in the future have this sort of idea that everything exists like a smorgasbord, and everybody hears everything. Everything is regional in the early 60s. We don't have instant communication. It costs money to call long distance. Right?
Then you have to get down to the Coca-Cola machine to use a payphone.
Right. Exactly. You're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
We had operators.
Right. Yes. We had just gone from using letters in our phone numbers for the phone number exchange. We just went to touch tone dialing is actually happening as we speak. So there were regional hits. There are musicians that you would only hear in San Diego. And by the way, I populate my radio station with them because we would hear them here. Dick Dale was totally a regional hit until he was on, I think it was the Ed Sullivan Show. And by the way, this is great. So I did Condor last year. And so I had two panels. I had one on Saturday, one on Sunday. I went on Saturday, did my panel, and then I went up to San Juan Capistrano and watched Dick Dale in concert. And let me tell you, 55 years from 63, so when he's 80 years old, the man still shreds. Wow. You get a chance, watch Dick Dale. And I got to come back the next day, do a panel, and say, yeah, last night I saw Dick Dale.
So how was Highway 101 going up to Los Angeles?
Curvy and long. I can't wait until they finish the Interstate 5. But, and maybe we'll need two freeways at some point for San Diego. I don't know. Unless you want to take the 395 through all the fields or whatever.
That show you mentioned, The Lieutenant, hasn't really gotten very good reviews. Do you think Gene's career is over? Do you think he's ever going to make anything else? Or?
I think Gene will be fine, but I think what's interesting is why The Lieutenant is getting bad reviews. So, I mean, it's not tanking, but the real issue with The Lieutenant is I don't think people want to watch a show about the military right now. I mean, we're starting to get headlines every single day of American servicemen being killed in Vietnam. And I think that's hitting a little too much close to home. So it's a great show, but I think that's not what the people want to see. So you're saying the Vietnam War?
No, the show.
They've been saying that one for a while.
Yeah.
I've got a bridge in Brooklyn if.
So you think we're safer on the SS Minnow than on a Navy?
That reference means nothing to me. I'm sorry.
All right. Speaking of winding down, we need.
But if you're talking about there's a show, you guys know Doug Lewis? That's a show that just ended the other day. The guy who plays Maynard T. Krebs, great beatnik moron character. Yeah, he's he's probably got a career.
So it's time for the traveler to choose who gets prizes, and then talk about his last.
My last bit, my pitch, make you all pay for coming here.
We don't make anybody do anything.
That's true. So you pick out. So obviously she wins. And I guess he wins even though he was wrong. Mr. George Jetson over there wins.
Gideon, young traveler has a nominee. Absolutely. Anybody in the Expanse has good taste.
All right, so let me see how many prizes I have, because that'll determine.
Here, I'll count. You make your pick.
Okay, so everyone we've nominated for a prize, come up here, you will get a free prize. Second, the journey is free. Always will be, always has been. There's no advertisement, any of that. However, if you would like to support the journey, last year I got to quit my job and live the dream. So I am now an author. And as of last year, I became an actual published author in a real book. So I am the lead story in this, Tales from Alternate Earths 2. It's a story about Valentina Tereshkova, but in a universe that never happened, where the Soviets made it to the moon and the Kinks wrote a rock opera about the love of Andy and Tina. And even people who are not related to me say it's a pretty good story. So this is a book that sells for $10 on Amazon, and I'm going to sign it and sell it to you for $15 here.
But it will be signed.
But it'll absolutely be worth it to me. No, really, it's pretty good. It's up for a Sidewise Award this year. The book before this, which I'm not in, won the Sidewise. So yeah, check it out. Tales from Alternate Earths 2. But either way, thank you guys very much for coming. I hope you will go to galacticjourney.org. Leave comments, join the journey. It's like a 1960s LARP.
Yeah.
Everyone gets super involved. It's a lot of fun. And we started out with just one person. There's now 20 of us working on the journey.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot, the majority of whom are women.
Right.
And it's a really great group. It's a lot of great authors with really interesting perspectives.
All right, so I got 6 prizes. So who's all the people getting prizes? 1, 2, 3, 4.
You get 2 more.
5. So 4. 2 more.
This one.
Yes, you sir, and you ma'am. Gally. Battle Angel. Come on out. All right, this is really it. Now this is gonna be the final applause.
So, thanks so much for coming, guys.
Stay, because at 8 o'clock.
Digitalisms of Doom is taking the stage.
It's like nerdy electronica, the next generation of They Might Be Giants. You really have to watch it. We're going to stay to watch them.
Yeah.
Right on.
Now, this is the fun part. I get to pick what's the most appropriate prize. Who was the one who talked about taking the night? Alright, so I'm going to give you the second weekend of the Van Dyke show. No, I should still go that day. You have to go. Yeah, I'll find a way to run your account at some point. Alright, who likes, who said Marion Zimmer, Brad? That was you, wasn't it?
No, I
Okay, so you get Marion Zimmer, Brad.
Well, yes.
All right, you are into science fiction. You will love this. It's a full Anderson book. I read it last year. It just came out last year. It's really good in space comic. I give it 5 stars. 5 is the best. Are you a reader or a watcher? I want to. You said Jets. You do that.
Oh my God. Roger Corman.
All right, now
I was wrong.
Right, I should give you the book, but these are both good though. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna. You want me to give him your prize? Sure. So this is a movie last year, and it's surprisingly much. It's very intimate.
And they're in there.
I think I need to just zoom.
This is the latest novel by Brian Aldiss.
More like I'm gonna just rip it on my
I think you'll
own.
like it.
We
gave it
should.
4 stars.
If it's not got a riff already.
That'll be a blind
No
riff,
crappy
so I'm
practice
gonna.
for
I
anybody.
watched it like
Thank you.
7 or 8 years ago, but I don't remember
Alright,
any of
thank you,
it, so
brother.
I must have
No,
won.
it's okay. The host sucks, but okay.
Shall I cut?
Huh?
Cut?
Sure.